This video is brought to you by my new book, The Triflers. The ebook is available at the link in the description. Elliot Rodger lived a life of pain and misery, from the relentless social rejection he faced to the blistering heat of a Starbucks latte swallowed too quickly. But one day over the course of his 22-year life was far worse than the rest. This one day served as the ultimate example of the darkly hilarious trials and tribulations Elliot faced throughout his life. Today I'm going to tell you the story of the worst day of Elliot Rodger's life. Let's set the stage. The date was Saturday, July 20th, 2013, less than a year before Elliot's day of retribution. At this point in his life, he already knew he was going to commit a massacre on the streets of Isla Vista. He was angry and frustrated with society, and he was more than ready to die getting revenge on the Chads and Stacys of his college town. However, Elliot decided to give society one final chance to treat him fairly, an all-or-nothing gamble. Elliot's plan was to go to a party and lose his virginity, and if he failed to do so, then retribution was an absolute certainty. It was the day that I decided to go out in Isla Vista in an attempt to lose my virginity before I turned 22. That was the only thing that could have saved me. I was giving the female gender one last chance to provide me with the pleasures I deserved from them. Honestly, this is the setup for the greatest teen sex comedy ever made. The nerd who wants to lose his virginity by the end of the night, and if he fails, is going to murder everybody at the party. And it turns out, the events that unfolded that night are so unbelievably funny that no actual comedy film can ever hope to compare. Before that night even began, Elliot knew he would need to get tipsy in order to garner the courage to walk into a college party, so he bought a bottle of vodka and took a few shots of liquid courage. However, Elliot took a few shots too many, as he was already wasted by the time he arrived at Del Playa Street. Fueled by his drunken ambitions, Elliot wandered into a random house party with his eyes peeled for a hot blonde goddess to take his virginity. I was so drunk that I walked right into a wild house party that was taking place on Del Playa. They had a DJ playing annoying hip-hop music that all the young people liked these days, and there was a ping pong table set up where lots of popular kids were playing beer pong, a crude drinking game. There were about 100 people at that party, and everyone was socializing with a group of friends, except for me. I walked around in my drunken confidence for a few moments, helped myself to the beer they had, and tried to act like a normal party goer. Alright, so Elliot was already far too drunk before he got to the party, and now that he's there, he's downing a few beers. Let's juxtapose this high level of drunkenness with the fact that Elliot is on a mission to get laid, and if he fails, he intends on killing everyone. Now, with those two ideas in mind, let's ask the age-old question: what could possibly go wrong? So, what was Elliot's strategy for getting laid that night? Well, he got drunk, and now he's randomly walking around the party waiting for a girl to approach him. When this brilliant strategy somehow fails, Elliot gets a bit peeved. I soon became frustrated that no one was paying any attention to me, particularly the girls. I saw girls talking to other guys who looked like obnoxious slobs, but none of them showed any interest in me. As my frustration grew, so did my anger. Elliot then comes across a beautiful blonde girl talking to an ugly Asian boy, and this gets his blood boiling. Being half Asian himself, Elliot can't believe that a full-blooded Asian boy is getting attention from a master race female specimen while he's been wandering around the party all alone. This is an insult, and Elliot isn't going to let them get away with it. So he marches over to the couple and shoulder checks the guy as hard as he can. However, instead of knocking his target down, Elliot ends up knocking himself over. I angrily walked toward them and bumped the Asian guy aside, trying to act cocky and arrogant to both the boy and the girl. My drunken state got the better of me, and I almost fell over to the floor after a few minutes of this. Even though Elliot is literally attacking them, the couple tells him he's too drunk and offers to get him some water. But Elliot isn't having that shit. He came here to get laid, not to get water. So he angrily marches away and out onto the front lawn. In order to calm down, Elliot decides to climb onto a wooden ledge and enjoy the view of Del Playa Street. However, this strategy backfires, as the sight of hundreds of happy, partying college students only fills him with more virgin rage. He then pointed his fingers like guns and pretended to shoot all of the partygoers while laughing maniacally to himself. But Elliot wasn't alone up there for long. After a few minutes of doing his best Charles Whitman impression, a group of students, both boys and girls, climbed onto the wooden ledge to join him. They were all obnoxious, rowdy boys whom I've always despised. A couple of pretty girls came up and talked to them, but not to me. They all started socializing right next to me, and none of the girls paid any attention to me. Now keep in mind, Elliot's goal that night was to get laid, and evidently he thought that acting like a rude, arrogant asshole was the best way to get his noodle wet, because in response to being ignored, Elliot stood up and began insulting everybody. I rose from my chair and tried to act arrogant and cocky toward them, throwing insults at everyone. They only laughed at me and started insulting me back. That was the last straw. I had taken enough insults that night. So Elliot insults everybody, they insult him back, and then he says this is the last straw and he'd taken enough insults that night. This is a comedic lack of self-awareness so incredibly high that you'd think Elliot Rodger was an anime YouTuber. As retribution for these insults, Elliot then tries to push the girls off of the 10-foot-high ledge. I shit you not. I guess considering the fact that Elliot did kill 6 people, him trying to push these girls from a ledge isn't that surprising, but still, what the fuck? A dark, hate-fueled rage overcame my entire being, and I tried to push as many of them as I could from the 10-foot ledge. My main target was the girls. I wanted to punish them for talking to the obnoxious boys instead of me. It was one of the most foolish and rash things I ever did, and I almost risked everything in doing it, but I was so drunk with rage that I didn't care. Being the wimpy kid that he is, Elliot failed to push any of the girls from the ledge, and then the guys they were talking to started pushing him, and he fell down into the street and snapped his ankle. Out of fear of further physical punishment, Elliot began to drunkenly stumble away from the party on a broken ankle. Now you're probably thinking, wow, what a night. Elliot picked a bunch of fights, broke his ankle, and then stumbled home. Surely that night couldn't have gotten any worse, right? Wrong! Elliot made it halfway down Del Playa Street before he realized he was missing his Gucci sunglasses that his mother had bought for him. He assumes one of the guys who pushed him from the ledge must have stolen his sunglasses, and he isn't going to let them get away with such a heinous crime. So, he marches back to the house party and starts yelling at a group of guys, accusing them of stealing his Gucci sunglasses. But here's the problem. Elliot was so drunk he forgot where the house party was and was now angrily yelling at a group of guys at a completely different party. Haha, boy, I sure do hope somebody got fired for that blunder. So naturally, upon being verbally assaulted by a random drunk kid at a party, the group of jocks became hostile with Elliot and then beat the shit out of him in front of everybody. They called me names like faggot and pussy, typical things those types of scumbags would say. A whole group of the obnoxious brutes came up and dragged me onto their driveway, pushing and hitting me. I wanted to fight and kill them all. I managed to throw one punch toward the main attacker, but that only caused them to beat me even more. I fell to the ground where they started kicking me and punching me in the face. The group eventually left Elliot lying alone in the street, bloody, beaten, and bruised with a broken ankle. But even in that moment, Elliot didn't lose hope of losing his virginity that night. He knew that a hot blonde girl would see what had just happened to him, and she would help him stumble home and nurse him back to health, and even have sex with him to make him feel better. But of course, this didn't happen. And despite all of the horrible things that had happened to him that night, Elliot saw this as the worst offense of all. The worst part of this whole ordeal was not getting beaten up, oh no. It was the fact that no one showed any concern. There was only one group who helped me to the end of Del Playa, but after that they abandoned me. Not one girl offered to help me as I stumbled home with a broken leg, beaten and bloody. If girls had been attracted to me, they would have offered to walk me to my room and take care of me. They would have even offered to sleep with me to make me feel better. But no, not one girl showed an ounce of concern for me. They didn't care. No one cared about me. I was all alone. But even that isn't the end of Elliot's pain and suffering that night. When he finally managed to make it home, he realized his 22-karat gold necklace was missing. And this was his breaking point. In the same way that Walter White died in that crawl space and only Heisenberg emerged, this was the moment that Elliot Rodger died and the Supreme Gentleman took over. I sulked for a long time, and then I reached up to my neck to feel my special golden necklace, and I felt nothing there. In the midst of the fight, one of those horrible punks had snatched off my special golden necklace that my grandma Amma had given me. That necklace was one of the most special items I had, and now one of those evil, wretched thugs will be selling it to buy drugs. I broke down in anguish and wailed in agony, crying and crying until I passed out in my bed, all alone. And that's the story of how Elliot Rodger was gracious enough to give society one final chance to cure him of his virginity, and in response, society spit in his face, stole his sunglasses and necklace, and snapped his ankle. Let this story be a message to high school and college students everywhere. You might be awkward, you might be bad at socializing, you might not get invited to parties, but at least you've never had a night as horrendous and embarrassing and hilarious as this.